Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please remain standing for the university anthem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Francois van der Westhuizen. It's my great honor and pleasure to do the welcoming introduction at this inauguration of Prof. Neumann tonight. Actually, just the welcoming. I would like to first welcome the following distinguished guests here and the functionaries present here in the front. First of all, Professor Linda du Plessis, the Vice Principal and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Teaching and Learning at the Northwest University as a main functionary here tonight. Welcome to you. Then full complement of the deanery here tonight, Professor David Modise, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences. Welcome to you, sir. And then Professor Tebe Medupi, there behind him, the Deputy Dean for Teaching and Learning with Community Engagement and Internationalization these days. Welcome to you as well. Then we have a special guest from a friend faculty of ours, Professor Liesel van Dijk. She's the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering. We all know her very well. Welcome to you, especially tonight. There was going to be some other guests that you were going to host here as well, but we're happy that you were willing to join us here tonight. Thank you very much. And then we have Professor Stuart Pickett, who's the line manager of Professor Neumann, and he's the director of the School of Geospatial Sciences. Welcome to you, Stuart. And then alongside him are several members of the faculty that was part of the procession. And thanks for you also in your formal capacity here. A warm welcome to you as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, you know that this event is about Professor Frank, So welcome to you, and it's a personal event also. It's not only formal. So there's several family members and friends around you here that you invited with to this special event. These people that are close to you was part of your life journey, not necessarily your academic career, but they were close to you. So we would like to extend a warm welcome to you, especially here. It will be strange for you to witnessing this mix of formalities and celebrations, but a special welcome to you. We hope you feel welcome at the campus here and the Northwest University. Then on the guest list, there's many colleagues. I see there at the back, very close colleagues of Professor Frank. And students, definitely not the least. I'm sure Prof. Frank will agree to that. There's many students here was also invited. And all of these colleagues and students, they are here to also celebrate the evening of the conferral of the highest academic achievement that academic colleague can achieve. And as these people will very well know, they have witnessed the journey that he was on. They've walked along with him. The highlights of this early part, that is in a way an early part of your career and the legacy that you are working on as a full professor, that the faculty and the university are now recognizing. So a special welcome also in a different capacity to you all here today. So that is the welcoming, and I hope you all enjoy this evening. And with this, I would like to hand over to Professor Modise to introduce Professor Neumann.
Good evening, everyone. It's always necessary to adjust the mic after Prof. Francois because we're differently challenged. I know that you have been welcomed, but it would be amiss of me not to welcome you as well. In particular, the family of Prof. Frank, himself as well, as the inaugurant, and I want to recognize the presence of Prof. Linda du Plessis, who is the Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning, and of course, all colleagues here, Prof. Liesel van Dijk. I don't know whether to call it a sister faculty or brother faculty, but from the other faculty which we are working very close with, Prof. Francois, I recognize you, Van der Westhuizen, for this warm welcome, Prof. Rodney Tebemi-Dupi as well, all the directors, all the staff and students, and all the visitors. And I think there must be some visitors online as well. I think this is being streamed live. Mine is a task of just introducing Prof. Frank Harold Neumann. As a trained geologist and paleontologist at the University of Bonn, Germany, and a C1 rated scientist, specializing in vegetation and climate history of Southern Africa, Europe, and West Asia. Through pollen, spore, algal, dinoflagellate, and micro-charcoal records, he is reconstructing biome evolution from the Paleogene to the Holocene. More recent research where he collaborated and supervised students reached as far back as the Permian and Cretaceous. His research highlights climate change, fire, and human impacts in shaping South Africa's unique vegetation landscapes, often supported by geochemical and sedimentological proxies. In applied palynology, he investigates atmospheric pollen dispersal and has expanded his expertise to honey quality control. Frank Neumann has built a strong international research footprint, collaborating with colleagues, for example, in Germany, Sweden, France, Switzerland, USA, Spain, United Kingdom, and across Southern, Western, and Northern Africa. He contributes to multidisciplinary networks that link palynology with archaeology, ecology, and climate modeling. He has published extensively in leading journals such as Palynology, Review of Paleobotany, and Palynology, Quaternary Service Reviews, and the Holocene, as well as contributing book chapters on African vegetation history, and his work is widely cited in regional and international synthesis, that is in Google Scholar, with an H index of 30. In addition, he has supervised numerous honors, masters, and PhD students and hosted several postdoctoral fellows on topics ranging from quaternary vegetation change to applied aerobiology, many of whom have progressed to research and academic careers, reflecting his commitment to capacity building and the training of the next generation of paleoecologists and palynologists. At Northwest University, he has built up Palynology lab capacities, including microscopy facilities and the provision of coring equipment, and implemented paleontological and biogeographical topics into teaching on multiple levels, such as engagement in an urban garden initiative, raising awareness regarding pollen allergies, and organizing geology and paleontology events for children. He is engaged in community service and outreach activities at Northwest Universities. I just want to say just one last few words, that in ancient Greece, inaugurations were at times pompous and decadent, but mostly dignified and well-meaning, and serving as the opportunity for the formal investiture of a person into a position of authority. And so today is that day that marks the rite of passage and the entry of Prof. Frank Harold Neumann into the distinguished community of university's most senior academic. With those few words, I would like to invite Prof. Frank Neumann to come forward. Somebody was playing a trick? Yes.
Okay, let's start. So welcome everyone. Yeah, thanks to everyone for coming, and thanks also for introducing me. As you can see, actually, can I walk to the other side? Is there, with that I can, yeah? Okay, can I also walk there? I hate it. Okay, so, so I don't like to stay in somewhere. I like to move around. So as you can see, so basically that's my topic, exploring past environment and human impact through palynology. And I also want to underline every now and then why that is a new research field at Northwest University, together with the whole of paleontology actually, and why it should matter. Yeah. All right. So many of you will know that South Africa is globally known as like a treasure chest of fossils. Yeah. So you have the hominids in Sterkfontein. You have the mammal-like reptiles in the Karoo. Yeah, and so there is a huge amount of attractions, yeah, that internationals are coming to South Africa. So it's also not surprising that you have a lot of paleontological institutions in South Africa. Yeah, and so we are quite happy that we have now, through very awkward coincidences, a total of 4 trained paleontologists at Northwest University, including Dr. Eugene Berg, yeah, who is a micropaleontologist. And then we have Sandiso Guzi up there, who joined agriculture, but he is an expert in paleoentomology. Yeah, and the only one in South Africa who can look at fossil insects and identify them. And with me and Moteng Mosari, we have 2 palynologists here. Yeah, so that is quite an asset. So paleontology, for those who might not have heard that term before, is the study of ancient organisms, can be plant, fungi, animals. Whereas environmental ecology, which is also a field where I'm very much involved, and Prof. Alex Schumann up there is one of my collaborators at WITS. So we do a lot of ecology together, and environmental ecology obviously deals with the interaction of humans with their environment. Yeah? Touches on fields like agriculture and so on. And examples in Southern Africa would be, for example, Great Zimbabwe, where I'm not working, but that is one of the top sites in South Africa. So palynology is actually a very interdisciplinary field. And as you can see here, ecology is left out here. We just focus on the natural sciences. It's sort of an overlap between geology and paleontology, yeah, which are sister disciplines, and biology. Yeah? So you can see that there are overlaps between paleontology and botany, and we call that palebotany. And palebotany is also a field where often palynology is included, because pollen are obviously fossil remains of plants, but you can as well draw links between sedimentology and paleontology, and you can study, for example, environmental reconstructions. Yeah? And palynology falls into all of those areas and has links to all of them, yeah? Including applied fields, which is not the topic today. So, but in paleoecology, we study, for example, how climate change in the past has affected the vegetation. Yeah? And we study also how humans have interacted with vegetation or the environment as a whole, yeah, through, for example, agriculture, introduction of crops and all of that. And we also want to know how we can track basically plant evolution in the pollen record or biome evolution. So palynology, per definition, is the study of organic walled microfossils. Yeah? But you can also study modern organic walled remains. So it includes pollen grains, which are normally produced by either flowering plants or, for example, conifers. But it also includes spores produced, for example, by ferns, dinoflagellate cysts, which are marine microorganisms, but also quite a lot of different other organisms which you can find in such a record. Such as, for example, algal remains. And obviously you can get them from different time periods, and there's just some examples here of some modern pollen and some which are from the Oligocene, but also a dinoflagellate cyst and a fungal fruit body is also shown here. So you find a huge abundance of different kind of organisms. And so, of course, when I came in 22, and shortly after that, also Moteng Mosari was coming, we started building up a palynology lab, because you have to extract pollen and spores out of the sediments or out of soil. Yeah? And you use chemicals for that, obviously, such as acids. And so obviously you need a lab, yeah, which thankfully, with the help of Northwest University, but more specifically USM, was basically installed. Yeah? So now it's up and running. We also, through the subject group, got coring equipment. So now we have a peat sampler. We also have a percussion corer. And as you can see in the top right, We have now at the moment 8 microscopes, and we'll get very soon 2 more. So that allows us to train quite a number of master and PhD students and also honor students. Yeah, so on the bottom right, you can see that we are also active in the field of applied palynology, where we do where we basically monitor atmospheric pollen in the air. Yeah, so we have one of those spore traps sampling pollen on the roof of E4 here on our campus. Yeah, so that will basically tell people which kind of allergic pollen are in the air. Yeah, so but again, palynology is the topic today. But what are pollen? They are tiny parts of the reproduction cycle of plants. They contain male reproductive cells. And well, obviously, then you need to transport pollen from one flower to the next for fertilization. And as a vector, you can have either wind or water, which is sort of like a more random way of dispersing pollen, which means you need a high number of them. Or you are more specific, and then you use, for example, bees. You attract them to the flower, for example, via nectar, and then they do their function, basically, yeah, in the reproductive cycle of plants. So that means that wind-transported pollen are normally strongly overrepresented if you find them in sediments, versus insect-pollinated pollen, which are underrepresented. Yeah, so that is just a little bit of a background. Before we start now looking at South Africa itself and why it's so attractive for this kind of research. So that is the map showing you the modern biomes of Southern Africa. And if you just look at South Africa alone, we have 9 different biomes here, highly distinct units with their own special set of plants and animals and their own climate, yeah, reaching from winter rainfall, yeah, at the western coast to summer rainfall at the eastern coast. Yeah, huge diversity, which makes it very challenging for any palynologist working there. And you all know maybe the fynbos biome with its extremely high biodiversity, and we want to track that. How do those biomes evolve, and how is biodiversity evolving? So that takes us back to our first study site, which is just about 100 kilometers to the north of Cape Town. And that's a time period about more than 25 million years ago. And that's how it was imagined in a paper in 2015 with subtropical forest along the Western Cape. Yeah, but there is one specific sediment called the Elandsfontein Formation where you can find those records. At that time, it was assumed to be mid-Miocene, and it was very vague in its chronology. So we had to go back in time and find records which have a high resolution and which we can date. So overall, the climate in the last 65 million years the temperature was decreasing. Also in blue, you can see the sea level was decreasing, but you can see also many fluctuations over time. And if you look carefully, you can spot here the Oligocene and Miocene, which is the time of interest, reaching a plateau with a lot of fluctuations here. Yeah? And so you can connect to sea level fluctuations, and the Elandsfontein Formation contains river deposits like sand, clay, and peat, which preserve pollen very well. So in red, the Elandsfontein Formation, here is Cape Town. Our 2 sites, Langebaanweg and Saldanha Bay, very close to each other. And so we want to look at the origin and evolution of the fynbos and link it also to sea currents and sea level fluctuations. And we want to improve the chronology and also see how diverse the vegetation is. Is it similar to today's vegetation or not? So this is a very complex pollen diagram where I will not go into the details, but it shows you one thing. It's a highly, first of all, how it works here is the depth. Here the percentages, and each curve in percents shows you certain taxa fluctuating over time in that record. Yeah, between the Oligocene and the early Miocene, when that river was depositing sediments and pollen can settle down. So what we see is a lot of yellowwood trees which are still growing in the area. What we also see here in red are fynbos elements like ericas and proteas. But we also see lots of palms which don't grow unless you plant them in the area of Cape Town. You find a lot of subtropical trees in an immense, highly diverse, mostly forested environment. And in purple, you see mangroves. So mangroves only grow maybe, for example, at Richards Bay, yeah, at the eastern coast, or up in Nigeria, yeah, but not at the Cape today because the water is too cold, yeah, and they need at least 19 degrees water. So meaning during that time period, we had a warm sea current there. The cold Benguela current was not active yet, and a completely different vegetation with a lot more summer rainfall, yeah, and so which we can imagine like that. That is a profile showing you the topography with yellowwood trees growing, mangroves along an estuarine, subtropical trees growing, a lot of their relatives which you find now in KwaZulu-Natal, including the miombo tree, oddly enough, which you find, for example, in Mozambique, yeah, or again in Nigeria. So a completely different environment to today, but interspersed in between those like red dots, to a certain degree also fynbos elements. Yeah, so meaning fynbos evolved not when the Benguela current was already around, at least not fynbos plants, because we find all of them here. Proteas, ericas, Restionacea, all of them were already in those ecosystems, maybe fulfilling different functions than they do today. So this is another diagram that is based on a master thesis by Moteng Moseri, yeah, which showed an even higher diversity, but now more inland and more affected by sea level fluctuations. Again, the similar set including mangroves here, but this time a clear change, because here in the Miocene you can see much more wetland elements, the vegetation is opening up. You find more fynbos elements here in red, and whereas the forest elements are decreasing. So our idea is that rising sea levels, because you find 4 periods of high sea levels and sea level retreats in there, together with a change in seasonality, maybe more winter rainfall, and higher aridity drove a vegetation turnover and the emergence of more fynbos elements. Yeah, so, and you can link that to sea level fluctuations. Whenever the curve moves to the right side, it's higher than the current sea level. When it moves to the left side, it's lower than the current sea level. And you can see the same time period now covering 28 million years until 16 million years ago. And that is based on those interesting microfossils, the dinoflagellates, which often live only for a very short time period. So you can use them as time markers. Yeah? So, and you can plot that next to the global sea level curve, and you will see, for example, when the sea level is increasing, you get a lot more marine indicators. So with that kind of background, I will now guide you to the next cluster of sites, which is along the Indian Ocean coast and will bring us to a much more modern time, just covering the last about 20,000 years. Just in a nutshell, any of those red dots shows one of the interesting sites which we can sort of discuss. Even during the last 11,000 years, the climate is not staying stable. Yeah, so the Pleistocene ends about 11,700 years ago. After that, steep temperature increase, but overall a lot of fluctuations. So we are also, of course, interested to track those. So this is one site in Maputo Bay. It's a marine core caught by German colleagues, and it was left to us for study. And that is now the close-up. So here is Durban. Up there is Mozambique. And here is Maputo Bay with the first site. And those different colors show you the different biomes. So Indian Ocean coast belt biome is very warm, humid, almost tropical, with palms and a huge diversity of different trees, including some of them which we already have seen when we were back like 25 million years ago. The pollen looks very similar. So those are basically those were the ancestors of those plants. So it's a huge mosaic between subtropical forest thickets, and in the interior, in those brown and green colors, that is savanna, that is grassland. And up here, we have more Miombo woodland. Yeah? And Miombo we already have met before, deep in the Miocene, but that's where it grows today, in this type of summer rainfall, almost tropical conditions. Some pollen, very diverse. Some erica shrubs still, but a lot more forest trees. Savanna elements are, of course, also present, including acacias. As are conifers, but that is mainly the yellowwood tree, podocarp, which also grows in this type of ecosystem. And then, of course, you have herbs. We also found charcoal telling you fluctuations in the fire regime, also some molds and smuts, fern spores, and wetland elements. And of course, because it's a marine core, you will also find some dinoflagellates. Yeah? So that is the diagram, reaching from about 17,000 until 14,000 BP, the first time period here. So that is the end of the Pleistocene. It's very cold during that time, which is shown by low values of trees and high values of Ericacea. Yeah, and you can see the Ericacea here, and you can see their clustering there. So that is a typical phenomenon. When it's cold in the summer rainfall region, you get ericas. So the next time period, until about 9,000 before present, the yellowwood trees are still standing strong, but it's getting warmer now. The atmosphere is heating up. With that, you get all those green elements, which are savanna trees, strongly increasing, and you get also mangroves growing here. Yeah? So overall, the sea level is now increasing, and until you have a time period until about 3,700 BP, where now the podocarps are even stronger, the yellowwood trees. So this is like a very humid time period where it was also warm and the sea level reached a peak. So that drowned the mangroves, which are now more or less disappearing from the record, whereas, as you can see, all the savanna elements are still present. So those are the last about 3,500 years of the record. The podocarps are decreasing with an increase of anthropogenic indicators, like pines, for example. Unfortunately, the last couple of half a meter or so was heavily disturbed. So the chronology up here is not very reliable. But you can now compare to other records. So this is Lake Etesa, which is to the south of San Lucia. And those are stacked pollen diagrams. And if you put them next to each other and correlate them along the right time slice, you can see that the overall pattern is very similar, including this humid podocarpus period here. Yeah? So that shows us that the regional vegetation developments along the Indian Ocean coastal belt were very similar, yeah? In a large area. And it also aligns well with an increase of the sea level, an overall increase of the temperature, and also of the precipitation. Oh, that's a new paper. It was just published a couple of days ago. And so you can, it's open access. So this is just one more record. And as you can see here, close to the Drakensberg. Yeah, and I want to point out only one interesting thing here. It's a long record, but the most important thing takes place here at the bottom of that record between about 18,000 years before today and about 14,000 years ago. What you see here are heathlands, ericas, and that is now in the grassland biome. And restios, so that was mountain fynbos. So this biome is wiped out. It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah? So meaning even in that short time period, you can see that biomes were, according to climate change, expanding and sometimes even retreating. So that is the only example which I can give you in the Holocene of basically a biome completely disappearing and being replaced by grasses, because they jump up here strongly. Yeah? So that is quite interesting. So in conclusion, when you look at Maputo Bay, you can see a cool late Pleistocene, and you can see the warming up. You can correlate it to sea level changes. In Mavakwa, the interesting thing is that the mountain fynbos was replaced during the Holocene by a temperate grassland, which still is there today. Okay, so one thing, and that is the last thing what I want to speak about, that is that dot up there, and that's in Mpumalanga. That is where the Bokoni people lived, and we will especially look at the last 2,000 years. We want to see if before the influence of the Europeans with all those pines and all of that, the Iron Age farmers were also impacting the landscape. Can we track crops and weeds before the Europeans were coming? So, and that is a project by PhD student Jerry Olatoyan, graduated also from WITS, where I was the co-supervisor. And we wanted to focus on the last 2,000 years of that record. And first step he did was a review of the existing literature, finding out that there are clear traces in the already published literature about pre-European influence on the vegetation, including increase of charcoal, increase of certain dung fungi, and a decrease of forest plants. So that is the Bokoni culture here, building those ring-walled sites, which are very unique. And that is the record itself. And from that record, I only want to show you what happens up there, because those are the last about 800 years of the record. Yeah? And what we can see here is that amaranthus, yeah, which is a herb, is reaching at around 600 BP before present, about 80% of the record. So when you see something like that in a record, it's a red flag. There's something odd going on. So our first idea was Amaranthaceae can reflect disturbances, but also aridity. So is that maybe an aridity indicator? Yeah, so because at around 500 BP there was a drought. And that was the time when the Bokoni people started building the terraces to retain water and nutrients. So maybe that's an idea. But then we read into the literature, and actually there is a crop called marojo, which you all know as African spinach, or maroch. Yeah? And this is probably the solution here. So this is an indicator, we believe, that the people there were actually planting African spinach, yeah? Which is a nice leafy vegetable. Yeah? And that is a very local impact because it was very close to core to those terraces where people were doing agriculture. So that means that there are even lessons to learn about sustainable agriculture today, yeah? Because obviously marojo was prolifically growing in this type of environment. Yeah? So you can easily, it's still grown, yeah? And it grows very rapidly, nearly almost like a weed. Yeah? And those agricultural communities, which were in the 10,000s actually, were based in on agriculture, mainly on sorghum, but now we believe it was not only things like sorghum, it was also maybe the African spinach. So this is just like very new kind of discoveries. So you can reconstruct long-term shifts in vegetation history and biome evolution. You can very well track human impact with palynology, yeah, and reconstruct past landscapes. And if you understood what was growing in the past and how it was basically disturbed by humans, it also adds value for conservationists. Yeah, if you want to declare a nature reserve, if you have a core from there, and you look into it, then you get a good idea of the natural vegetation before the Europeans were disturbing it. And then the ideas, potential even to advise sustainable land use. Yeah? And that was the example with the African spinach. So at the very end, some future research aims, what I want to do with palynology in the future. In the Quaternary, in the Paleogene, Neogene, I already worked, but we are now going deeper into time. We have a strong interest in the Cretaceous, especially in the Algoa Basin. That is why you see a dinosaur here. Yeah, it's famous for dinosaur fossils and would be great to reconstruct the vegetation during that time period. And we already are quite active in the Cretaceous anyways. Yeah, and then next to paleoecological reconstruction, which I already do, I want to understand pollen transport more. Also by applying our spore traps, because they catch every day the atmospheric pollen in the air. So you get a very good idea about tracking phenologies and understanding how pollen is actually transported in the system. And that might all end up in paleobiome modeling, yeah, which would be the grand aim. Yeah, because you've seen in some cases you have completely different biomes, and so you would like to quantitatively also reconstruct that. And with that, I think everyone who was listening here, and especially all those people here on the slide, including also my wife Sunny and my daughter Julie, and Prof. Louis Scott, who was my mentor at the University of the Free State, actually trained me in palynology, and we are still strongly collaborating. Then that was my PhD supervisor. Many thanks to Stuart Pickett and Prof. Carlos, and also to Prof. Francois. Yeah, and then thanks to all my collaborators, students, postdocs, and all of them. And yeah, that's it. Yeah.
No, not at all. You can just stand here. Okay.
Well, congratulations, Prof. Frank, on a thought-provoking lecture. As Prof. Francois said, becoming a full professor is the highest accolade at a university, and I think it's a personal and a professional milestone. We all know that becoming a full professor doesn't happen between the hours of 8 and 5, so also a word of congratulations to your family for supporting you. Your success is also their success. Also, Prof. David, congratulations to the faculty. We also know that we mentor one another, and they are colleagues, and again, your success is also the success of the faculty. Prof. Neumann, listening to your presentation, I think your journey is remarkable. The number of international networks you have formed, the high-impact publications, all of that, I think, are signs of the recognition and the impact of your work. So we wish you all the best on behalf of the university. I think the good thing about the new field is that your name becomes rooted in the legacy of the field of palynology. And my wish for you is that future scholars will refer to the groundbreaking work done by Professor Frank Neumann. Be assured of the support of the university, and once again, congratulations.
Yeah, many thanks. Questions allowed for the talk? Questions allowed for the talk?
Yes, if you can do that now.
Thanks.
You have to stand here.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
You can maybe just keep it here.
Yeah.
Prof. David, an unusual request. Prof. Neumann asked, are there any opportunity for questions from the faculty about his lecture?
Thank you very much, Prof. Linda. It's a very unusual request because most people are even afraid to address questions. It shows how confident Prof is. Perhaps even if it's not a question, maybe a comment from the colleagues and the people that he has worked with. Is there anybody for the taking? Or a student? Yes?
Frank, I'm interested, so if the fynbos evolved between subtropical, if the fynbos evolved between other sort of semi-subtropical plants, would the fynbos then have been fire dependent as it is now? Or do you find evidence of that?
Yes, good question, and there was plenty of charcoal in there. So we have a complete charcoal record for Sardinia Bay, and whereas the charcoal record for for Langebahnweg is still sort of under construction, yeah, but it shows you clear shifts. So the whole ecosystem was fire impacted. And I mentioned also that there were savanna elements there. Yeah, so we can assume, since savanna, at least modern savanna, is also a fire-dependent ecosystem, that there were also interlinkages. Yeah, and as I said, most of the major fynbos elements were already growing there, not in the form of a distinct fynbos biome. It's difficult to reconstruct, maybe as an undergrowth or in certain areas. But I assume very much, and we can see that there was a heavy fire impact on that ecosystem. Yeah, so it might have already evolved there because obviously fynbos is adapted also to fire and to poor soils. Yeah.
We'll take just one or two more, and we're using the mic just for the purpose of recording. So, okay.
Frank, thank you for an interesting lecture. I'm curious, looking at the relationships you're forming in the Amaranthus surge, I think in a Paleocene, and you are linking it to agricultural activity around the time and crop production. Now, in the history of Amaranthus, different populations will consider it a weed. Some will consider it African spinach, like you correctly allocated it. Have you looked at the human behavior around those times to actually tell what they were using the crop for, what they were using the plant for, whether it was considered a crop for food or a weed and removed, and it was probably just growing widely in the time?
Well, I mean, that is also something with Alex together and Tanya we have to work on, because we don't completely understand the agriculture in detail. So what you need to do for that, you also need to look for seeds. Yeah, for example, in those terraces, which will give you a direct indication what was growing there. It is just that I have never seen in my life, and I worked in very dry areas, for example, at the Dead Sea, where you can see loads of canopods growing. I've never encountered anything like 80% of Amaranthus here. Yeah? So that makes me think that it is actually a typical anthropogenic indicator, because we tilt ecosystems in a very drastic way often. Yeah? And I discussed that with Alex and also others, and we see a chance that this is indeed cultivated Amaranthus, but it is a wild hypothesis at this stage. Yeah? But even people sometimes, we can see that in records too, they utilize something from the nature, which often means they let it stand there. They don't destroy it, and then it grows. Yeah? And maybe that is also, this kind of cultivation is also possible. Yeah? That you let it grow next to you and that you harvest it, because as I said, it grows like wheat. It is a wheat. Yeah? So which makes it very nice for cultivation. You let it grow next to your house, yeah, where you can't grow anything else. And this is a very local record showing that amaranth was something extremely local, very close to the site. Yeah? So also that is possible, and it's some future research is needed to verify that. Yeah. Thanks.
I think we'll take the last one, and people will always have an opportunity to engage with him during, the meals. So we'll have the last one.
So, Frank, I have to ask a zoology-related question. You know that. I heard that Hyrax middens are very interesting, or natural pollen traps. Obviously not old enough for some of your interests and some of your questions, but do you think that's something interesting? Is there somebody working on these in South Africa? You know, maybe when you think about your pollen dispersal, your pollen phenology dispersal hypotheses, maybe, a linear transact like the Drakensberg range or something. Your comments on those, please.
Yeah, many thanks. Actually, it was my mentor, Prof. Louis Scott, who started that, to look into Hyrax dung, which you find mostly in drier areas because it builds up organic sediments, yeah, basically solidified pee and so on. And you can find excellently preserved pollen in there. You can even do geochemistry in those records, and you can easily date them because it's a high organic content. So there is a whole team around Brian Chase, who also worked a lot on those records, mostly in the western, rather drier half of South Africa. Yeah, but I know that there are Hyrex deposits also in our surroundings. Yeah, and I have to speak with Chris van Niekerk about that. He knows the area very well. And so it is possible to also get maybe local data. If it's becoming too wet, then that turns all into a slush, and then it's not preserved anymore. Yeah, but it is very possible maybe to find it also in other parts of South Africa, and I will certainly look into that. Yeah, so it's indeed, yeah, it's something to consider. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we ask Professor Tebimi to give us a vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I give vote of thanks, I have a surprise for Prof. Neumann. I believe there's some people who want to bring you something. These are the students of Prof. Neumann. Yes. Yeah. Some of them. Yeah. So, Prof. Neumann, as you are giving your lecture, I always keep a long list of things to tick, to see whether the lecture of the inaugural lecture, and those items, according to me, define what an excellent lecture, inaugural lecture is. So one of them is, did you give us sufficient information for us to follow what you're saying? And you tick that box. The second one is, did you inspire us to want to know more about your exciting field? And the answer is yes, you ticked it. The other one is, did you tell us about your contribution to the field? And the answer is you ticked it. And third, and not, all of it, but just because we don't have a whole, I'm standing between us and dinner and partying. So the last one is, did you... and then the last one is about time. Did you keep to the time? And the answer is yes, you kept to the time. So by my definition, according to all those categories, you gave a very excellent inaugural lecture. Thank you very much. And I think a lot of us can learn from what you have given. Even the passion that you showed in your lecture was great. So thank you. I think let's... And then let me end by thanking all our main functionary tonight, Professor Linda du Plessis, for the nice words of wisdom and encouragement to you and to all of us. Thank you very much, Prof, for supporting our faculty. I also want to thank our Executive Dean, Professor David Modise, for the very nice introduction, reminding us the achievement that you have made as a scholar at our faculty, at our university. I also want to thank my colleague, Professor Francois van der Westhuizen, the Deputy Dean for Research and Innovation. I want to thank the family and friends of Professor Neumann for supporting him and sharing him with us. Thank you very much. And of course, our very important guest from the Faculty of Engineering, Professor Van Dijk. Thank you for gracing us this occasion with your presence tonight. And I want to thank also Emma for organizing tonight's evening and her team, as well as Dalian and team, Professor, and also colleagues from EFNAS. Thank you very much, colleagues. I hope I've covered everyone. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly stand for the national anthem and the academic procession.
Why